The time has come to say goodbye to Japan. Growing up as a military child, I've moved around the world a lot, but Japan is the closest thing to home that I have. This is partly because I was born here, and partly because it's the only country that I keep returning to. My parents live here now, and so does my extended Japanese family. I've also never felt safer anywhere in the world than in Japan, and the convenience here is unmatched. Trains are always on time, people are polite to each other, it's clean, the food is so good, and general life is affordable. You can easily grab a bite to eat with drinks for under $15. There's no changing the fact that I love Japan, but I also want to give other countries a try. Even though I've been moving around the world since I was a child, this is the scariest move I've ever done. Before we'd move with my dad, who was in the Air Force, everything was already set up. Our new home, my school, his work, and everything we owned was shipped across. It was just transplanted from one country to another. And we generally never lived in any country for more than 3 years, so moving was part of the routine. There was no risk, and every other move always had a purpose and an end destination. When my parents were living in Germany, I moved to the US on my own to go to college at Notre Dame. After that, I moved to DC for law school, then Tokyo for work. But this move is different. There's no destination. Now I'm embarking on my own adventure. I don't know what lies ahead, but I just know that I'm at a place in my life where it's time. So why am I leaving Japan? I've been in Tokyo for almost 5 years now. I moved here right after graduating from law school to accept what I thought at the time was my dream job as a corporate lawyer at this fancy law firm. Spoiler alert, some of you know if you've seen the video, turns out it wasn't the dream job. I left that law firm and founded a legal tech company called Plug-in Law last year, and the business is doing well enough where we can live comfortably. Everything I do now is completely remote, so there's no work tying me to Japan. And when I graduated from Georgetown Law, I had over $200,000 of student loans, so I never could have taken a risk like this. But now that I've paid off my student loans, I don't have the debt looming over me. My finances are thankfully in check. I've got my emergency fund, no student debt, long-term investments in place, and as I've been building up these various income streams since quitting my law firm job, I've focused on diversifying my income streams. I think the last video I made a few months ago, I was at 12 income streams. So even if something terrible like YouTube shutting down happened tomorrow, I still have other income streams that wouldn't be impacted. I've diversified. And so really we have nothing binding us to Japan. We're free to go wherever we want to. So it seems silly if we pass on this opportunity. We also don't have any children, which can be a huge joy, but also a huge anchor to your life. As I mentioned, my upbringing meant I moved around a lot. This obviously shaped who I am, but also it's not the life I necessarily want for my children. I know firsthand how it feels to keep moving to different schools and making new friends. It's a lot harder for children to leave everything behind. In simple math, if you leave a place after 4 years and you're 8 years old now, that's half of your life being left behind. When I'm ready for children, I want to offer them stability. I want them to have one place that they can call home, one place they call kindergarten, elementary, middle school, and so on. I really want them to have the chance to make long-term friendships and lasting memories. So in my mind, I have a couple of years left before I'm ready for children, and so now is the chance for us to travel the world, living our digital nomad life, enjoying the freedom to move around. Another reason is taxes. It'd be odd for my channel if I didn't mention money. Japan isn't the most efficient place for taxes. Depending on your income, you can pay anywhere from 5% all the way to 45% for the national tax. And then in addition to that, there's the local tax, which is around 10%. Meaning if you're at that top end of income, you could be taxed over half. To put that into perspective, paying over 50% in taxes means that you're essentially working January through June for the government every year. I have no problem paying taxes, but there's no escaping the thought that you could have a similar life elsewhere and pay less in taxes. Japan is by far my favorite country in the world, and I'm really grateful that I've been able to spend so many years here. And it's probably not the last time I'll live in Japan, but there are some things about Japan that I wish were a little different. And I think living and working here versus being a tourist here is different. In Japan, there are these unspoken rules. If you're visiting Japan, you'll never experience this and it's not expected of you. But if you do live here, there are unspoken rules you're expected to follow, and if you don't follow them, you're judged. For example, if you're working in an office building and going into an elevator, there's an unspoken rule that if you're a woman, you're expected to stand right where the elevator buttons are and hold the door open to let all the men out of the elevator first, then you have to be the last one out, sort of out of respect for the men. And in general, I think there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made here for women's equality. In 2019, only 11% of managers in Japanese companies were women. Compare that to 43% of managers in the US and 39% in Sweden. Tokyo Medical University, which is like the Harvard of Japan, a few years back admitted to changing test results to exclude women so that more men would become doctors. There's obviously a lot of work that needs to be done. Another thing that I know not everyone will understand or relate to or agree with, so I want to be a bit sensitive about how I say it because I can only speak about my personal experience and I don't want to make generalizations, but as a half Japanese person here, my mom is Japanese, my dad is American, I've never felt fully accepted as Japanese. In Japan, I'm seen as a foreigner. There's a term called hafu, half, meaning you're half Japanese. And I remember a few years back, Naomi Osaka, who also has a Japanese mother and is hafu, decided to give up her US citizenship so that she could play for Japan in the Olympics. And this was the water cooler talk at the time among my Japanese colleagues. Is Naomi Osaka Japanese enough? They'd mentioned how she doesn't even speak fluent Japanese. And I remember feeling sad that instead of celebrating that this incredible athlete would be representing Japan, the conversation was on whether she was Japanese enough. And things are changing in the right direction, and this isn't representative of all Japanese. There are closed-minded people in every country, but it is something that, especially as a hafu, I've always felt a bit sad about. Of course, there are more surface level things about Japan that I wish were different. Fruit is so expensive here. Sometimes a single apple at a grocery store is more than $5. Real estate in Tokyo specifically is so expensive. If you're looking to buy a new apartment in Tokyo, $1 million will get you about 600 square feet. I just looked at Zillow, and in Texas, you can get 6,000 square feet for that price. Now, I don't want to dwell on these because really these aren't the reasons I'm leaving Japan, and still Japan is my favorite country in the world, and I feel lucky to have spent a large portion of my life here. So I'll go into the most personal reason why I've actually decided to leave Japan. With every big life decision I make, I always map out the pros and cons and try to be logical about it and see what's the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. When I left my law firm, that's the process I went through. So when my husband and I were weighing the options here and deciding if we would leave Japan, we went through creating this list, and one of the pros of leaving was that we'd be able to spend more time with his family. As background, my husband works in finance with crazy hours and only really gets one vacation a year. It's not exactly a long holiday either, max 7 days if he's lucky. Only 7 days a year to go either someplace new or visit his parents who live in Sweden. I've been really fortunate the past year and a half with my work completely remote to be able to visit my family often, but he hasn't had that privilege because he still had his 9 to 5. Something a friend said as we were talking to him about our idea of possibly leaving Japan really impacted us. He said, "It sounds a bit negative, but if you continue on this path of one vacation a year, you can literally count the number of dinners you have left with your parents. Just take the average life expectancy, assume for one vacation a year you get 5, 6, maybe 7 dinners, and then multiply that by whatever is remaining." My husband's parents are now in their 70s. They're healthy, but still, they're getting older. And just the thought of being able to quantify that, the number of dinners left, really hit us. And as I mentioned in my video about quitting the big law firm, the last 2 years of my life have made me realize just how limited time is. And spending time with the ones you love is so much more important than other things like money or having a prestigious job. So my husband, about a month ago, made the decision that he would leave his job too. And there are, of course, so many factors, including seeing greater opportunity outside of his current position, But ultimately, one of the main reasons came down to wanting freedom and wanting this control over his time. Warren Buffett once said that the most important decision you'll make in your life has nothing to do with money or your career, but it's actually who you choose to marry. I feel really lucky to have found someone who shares the same values as me. We both were in very traditional, demanding careers when we met. Him in finance, me in law, and now we've realized that we don't really care about the fancy titles that these companies can give us, or the salary that would golden handcuff most people. What we want and what we value is the freedom to spend time with our families, to not have to ask for permission to take 7 days off, and to try to have an impact beyond what we could have working for the large corporates. So he quit his job, he's going to be starting his own company that's completely remote, and we're ready for our next adventure. I've definitely joked that now he needs to make a YouTube video called "I Quit My Job After Learning This About Money," but I think he's gonna leave YouTube to me for now. Our next step is we're going to be living in Sweden for a month and a half, staying with my in-laws. These 6 weeks would have taken us 6 years to be able to spend this much time with them if we just had one vacation per year. So that's a pretty cool feeling. After Sweden, we'll be in the US for a couple of months, and then the plan is that next January, we'll pick our new home base. And I'm not positive where, but we're looking at a few different options. Ideally, we'd love a central location where we can easily get to Sweden to see his parents and Japan to see mine. We're also taking into consideration expenses, taxes, general quality of life, and all the other important stuff. Even though we should have a home base from January, the plan is still for the next couple of years to live a pretty nomadic life and keep moving to other countries, staying for a couple of months or so, discovering their customs, seeing the sights, and ticking off my bucket list. Ever since I was in high school, I've wanted to live in Spain and learn how to cook paella. Maybe even brush up on those Spanish lessons that I took in high school but really never used. Maybe I'll try to see all 7 wonders of the world, learn how to surf in Hawaii, or go sandboarding in Dubai. If you have any suggestions for where to live or where the next home base should be, I'd love to hear them in the comments. I don't feel sad about leaving Japan because I know it's not goodbye, it's just goodbye for now. And I'm excited because for the first time in my life, I'm not tied to one place because of my parents or school or work. Thanks to your support of this YouTube channel and your support of Plug-in Law, it's allowed me to take this huge leap of faith. I'm really excited for this next chapter, and I'd love to know your thoughts about my decision. If you are looking into starting your own business, I'm hosting a completely free live training next week where I'll cover the legal things you need in place to get started. So we'll talk about LLCs and trademarks and more. You can reserve your spot by clicking in the link below. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.